You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello and welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss. I'm Kim Wardlow, your host. I'm also the Executive Director at the Audio Information Network of Colorado, who is bringing you this podcast. We have started the new month of June, and our topic for this month is personal and professional development. So we are starting out the month with talking to Max Ivy, also known as the Blind Blogger. So he will be joining me here shortly, and we're excited to talk to him. And he has done a whole variety of things in his life and career. So I think this will be very interesting for all of you. I also just want to let you know that we will be having our Bringing Print to Life fundraising hike again this year. It will be August 12th. This year, which is a Saturday again. And we're actually going to be starting here in Boulder at our studios and going to a trail just outside Chautauqua Arches. So we're excited about that. Hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for folks who won't have to travel quite as far as we have in past years. And we'll have lunch back here at our studios. So stay tuned for more information on that. But August 12th is our hike. When we come back, we will be joined by Max.
This is Navigating Life with Vision Loss. If you have a question, please visit us at aincolorado.org/podcast-guest. Make sure to subscribe to all of our podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And now, here's your host, Kim Wardlow.
Hello, Max. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me, and also to your co-host for reaching out to me on LinkedIn and inviting me to be part of your show. So very honored to be here.
Yes, I totally rely on Jonathan Price, our podcast producer, to help with finding guests for our show and for our topics. So definitely a thank you to him. So Max, it's June. We just had the unofficial start of summer with Memorial Day. And when I think of summer, you think of fairs and carnivals and things. And I usually start my interviews with folks asking them if there's something that they'd like to share about themselves or some unique hobby or something unique about them. But I find I already know that you grew up in a family that was with the carnival and carnival owners. Very interesting. So you may have something else you'd like to share, but I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah. So my family has been in the carnival business in Texas for 3 generations now, 4 if you count my cousins who are continuing with Wagner's Kitty Carnival out of Aransas Pass, Texas. And all I ever really wanted to do was to be part of that business, and was lucky enough to be part of my own family's small carnival alongside my dad and my brothers for over 15 years, and enjoyed doing that. Learned a lot of lessons, spent a lot of time in the truck on the road from generally one small to medium-sized town to another, because we weren't the biggest carnival out there. But when you spend that much time with people in a small vehicle, traveling like we do, you have an opportunity to either become really good friends with somebody or to hate them completely. So I was lucky enough. I was very good friends with my dad. We were partners. We encouraged each other. We were both storytellers. Of course, we had to be storytellers because quite often telling somebody in law enforcement a good story would be the difference between getting to next week and not getting to next week. So it was very important to get to spend all that time with him. A lot of the things that I share with people through my work as a speaker and an author are things I learned either from him or while I was hanging out with him. And it's really surprises me how many of those things I learned being a carnival owner have value as a blogger, an author, a podcaster, a public speaker, etc. So, and for people who wonder, back in those days, carnivals were not year-round like they are now. They were seasonal. So carnies were the first side hustlers. Everybody in the business had to have a winter job, which usually meant selling Christmas trees or fireworks or stuffed toys on the side of the highway, or setting up rides inside a flea market if you were really lucky. So, and back then schooling was different. Now because of the internet, all the kids on the shows are homeschooled through the net. But back then, they would put the younger people in school with an older relative, an aunt, uncle, or grandparent. And you would spend the summer months with the family out on the road, usually rejoining them in Kansas or Nebraska or Minnesota, because that was where most of them were in June, July, and August. And it was an interesting way to live. And, it's great that my family, they always found a way to include me in the business. And in fact, I started working at my grandmother's cotton candy stand when I was 5 years old. And there were two reasons for that. One was because my dad felt like if I was inside a booth that I couldn't get into too much trouble, and that I couldn't accidentally bump into some drunk cowboy and start a riot. So, and of course, teaching somebody to work from an early age is never a bad thing, or at least that was how he and my grandmother saw it. So, but we had to make some workarounds because back then the equipment wasn't as safe as it is now. So, they had a huge popcorn machine that was very dangerous to operate. But once it finished popping the corn, I would box it and put the butter on it. Same thing with the thing that ground the ice. Back then, we used to have people bring blocks of ice out to the lot, and then you would break those blocks up with an ice pick. And naturally, I wasn't allowed to do that, or feed the ice into the grinder. But I could make a really pretty snow cone. And, so those kinds of things I did at that time. Later on, I would start working games because when you can't see what you're working with, people don't generally like you handling the food that they're buying. So I gradually progressed to games, and then I went away to college, and then I worked a little while with the IRS. And then when I came back, I returned to working games, but I also focused on doing the event bookings for our show. I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to people who were telling me no, and just basically just having to continue to ask people if they wanted our carnival until we found enough people to say yes that we could fill up 40 or 45 weeks in a season to try to make a living again next year. So it was an interesting time. The business has totally changed from then to now. It's so much more corporate. Back then, you could buy an adult ride brand new for $15,000. Now it's $850,000 or $1 million. It's just amazing how the industry has changed, in the 35, 40 years since I've been alive or been an adult. So, but yeah, just like most kids look forward to summer because the school is out, we always look forward to the summer because it meant we were going to go join the carnival. But just like school being out anywhere else, after a few weeks, it got to be a little boring. It was like, okay, we're done. We're
right.
We're
thing every day.
Yeah, we're ready to go back to school now, where the house has air conditioning and the toilet flushes. Let's go back and do that some more. So
all of those things.
Yes.
And you mentioned you started to lose your vision while you were still growing up and while you were working with your family business in the carnival. Did that change your goals or what you saw for yourself in the future when you realized you were losing your vision?
Well, it did in the short term, but eventually, there's only so much your parents and your relatives and your friends can do if you really are determined to do something. So in high school, the idea from many of my relatives was, a carnival owner can always use a good attorney. So my high school classes and my college work was, with the intention of going to law school, However, my grades and my law school admissions test scores were not considered acceptable by any of the schools here in Texas. And one school even sent me a rejection letter that asked me why a blind person even wanted to be an attorney. Of course, that was in 1990. Yeah. If that, he's just lucky he didn't do that in the days of social media, because then there would have been trouble.
Yeah.
So I did finish traditional high school and college. I also completed the requirements for Eagle Scout. I'm one of the few blind Eagles. And after college, I did go to Lions World Services for the Blind once I realized I wasn't going to be an attorney. And I went through their program to go to work for the Internal Revenue Service. I was what they called an automated collection specialist, which basically meant I sat on the phone and people called in and told me how miserable I was making their lives and how I needed to do something to help them. And after about 2.5 years of that, I decided that my mental health was worth more than they were paying me every other week.
Yeah, that's a huge difference, going from traveling and the carnival to phones and the IRS. That's a big change.
Yeah, I mean, especially the position I had. And that was one of, I dealt with one of the things a lot of people with vision loss and other disabilities have to deal with. Not only, they have this program at Lions World Services to train people in about 4 or 5 different positions with the Internal Revenue Service. But they haven't really, at that time, now this is, 30 years ago, so things have probably changed a little, hopefully. But at that time, they really didn't know where a blind person would go next. So just imagine being the first person this person talks to after they get this horrible letter telling them all the various mean things that they can do to a person for not paying their taxes or filing their returns. And you do that for weeks, if not months on end, because they don't have another job for you. That's, so it was part of it was just, like you say, being in a different situation, never having worked a traditional job before. But part of it was just them not really having a plan beyond, we want to look good by hiring these people. We're in a hiring freeze, so we love the idea of getting additional warm bodies. And if we have to get them from the School for the Blind to get them, we're happy to do that. But they really just didn't have a plan for me or for any of the other people I knew at that time past being an incoming call person. So, and that's something a lot of people deal with in employment even today is it's not just important to hire, but it's also important to have an approach for training, for promotion, for lateral advancement into positions that may be more satisfying to the individual employee. And that was one of the really hard lessons I learned, is that, I was fulfilling my obligation. I fit the hole that they wanted me in, but they really just hadn't thought too much farther past that, initial hire. And I hear from my friends that still is a problem with a lot of companies today. So,
right. Well, Max, how did you make the transition then? So you've already made one big change in your life, Carnival to IRS, and perhaps back. I know you're still involved with buying and selling rides, but how did you make the transition into being a blogger and an author and and mentoring folks?
Well, I'm going to tell people that there's 2 important things to know. One, I never planned to do this. And 2, it all started with one very small act, because when my dad passed away in 2003, I was really a mess. I lost my best friend, my business partner, the one person who would help me persuade the family that we actually needed to try to grow the business instead of just sustain it. And the person who supported some of my crazy ideas as far as how we might acquire new equipment. And I lost him. So we kept the show going for about 3 years. Eventually, we had to combine our rides with my Uncle Albert's Carnival. And we had competed very bitterly with my uncle over the years for events, even though he had a lot more rides than we did. So it was kind of an additional blow on top of everything else to be, we had to go out. We had to lose. But why did we have to lose to them, there
Right.
are lots of other carnivals we could have combined forces with. Why does it have to be those people? So, booking events is a very closely held bit of information among the show owners. So there was really nothing for me to do. And so I needed something else to do. And I thought, well, I've been helping my own family sell their used rides, and we needed to try to buy something a little newer. Maybe I could do that as a profession. So I said, okay, I'm going to start a website. I got the name of Midway Marketplace, and it turned out that was available. My brother actually filed for my domain name because I had really had no way to navigate the domain registry process at that time. They were really terribly inaccessible before some of the hosting companies got involved in the process. So I have this website, I have a domain, but I have no clue how I'm going to build a website or build a business off of it. And so I started asking a lot of stupid questions on the internet. I'm willing to admit many of them were stupid at the time. And eventually somebody said, Max, you need to go to the W3C.org school and go through their tutorials. So I went through their tutorials. I learned one little bit of code at a time until I could basically build pretty much anything I needed to. And what I couldn't build, I could borrow from other people who could. And, there was, even then there was a lot of open source stuff where you could embed people's JavaScript on your website to perform functions you weren't capable of creating with your own coding abilities. So I did that. Then I figured out how to get people to let me list their rides. I built an email list. Eventually, I started figuring out social media. I started a blog because once I had the website, everybody said, well, Max, if you have a website, you have to have a blog. So luckily, I found a product called Mars Edit from Red Sweater, which is a great third-party app that I highly recommend to any Mac user who's a blogger, whether they have a vision loss or not, because it just makes the process of creating blog posts in WordPress or Blogger or whatever platform you're using just so much easier, and it also allows you to create those posts offline. So, when you're traveling or when you have poor internet, you can do the work, and then when you get good internet, you just go ahead and publish. So I really appreciate the folks at Red Sweater and Mars Edit. And a little later on, I was asked to try to sell a carousel, and I asked the owners to send me a short video of it in operation. It turned out I sold the carousel in 30 days after it had been sitting there for a year with other larger, more reputable, longer-standing companies trying to sell it with no luck. So I said, maybe I should just record some videos. And so I started doing that. And basically, as challenges have come up to things I felt like I needed to do in order to grow the business of selling used rides, I learned new things. I found out I was capable of things I didn't know I could do before. And so as I did that, people started going, Max, it's really inspiring the way you take on these difficult challenges with joy. It's like you don't let any of this stuff bother you. You just, you just keep moving on through. So they said, we'd like to hear you share more about being a blind entrepreneur. And, people can take the word blind entrepreneur as they wish or don't wish, but that's the way it was brought up to me. And so I started the second website as The Blind Blogger, which is theblindblogger.net. And I did that because it was a name people had been using for me on social media for a couple of years because, as I'm sure you know, even now, there are a lot of sighted people who have no blind friends, or if they have blind friends, none of them are podcasters or bloggers. So to a lot of people, there still isn't a such thing as a blind blogger or podcaster or even author to some people. So it was a name they'd been using as shorthand. It stuck, and thankfully, I just decided to say thank you and run with it because it's allowed me to build a distinctive brand that does really well in all the major search engines. So that's how I went from, I started doing all this stuff for the Midway Marketplace, and then I just transitioned to it, doing the same sorts of things for the Blind Blogger. Just like I started doing podcast interviews in February of 2013, and as I transitioned from selling rides to giving people motivation through storytelling, I just applied those same things to theblindblogger.net, and as a result, I've written 4 books, 2 of them award winners. I've sung and spoken in public. I've written my own songs. I've traveled the country solo. I've been on hundreds of podcasts, started my own podcast, helped other people launch podcasts. I teach people how to be podcast guests and book them on shows. And so I just basically do the next thing that comes along. And some of the time it was somebody saying, Max, you're more powerful than you know you are. You should try this. And other times it was, Max, you really need to do this. Or sometimes it was, Max, I don't think you can do this. So I was like, okay, well, I don't.
It was a challenge.
Yeah, the challenge. And I've said this many times. One of the most valuable things that a friend can do for you is to double dog dare you to do something that scares you. And I had a woman who wasn't even a really close friend, but she was a internet friend who had a blog. Her name is Eve Koivula, and she challenged me to write a book in 45 days to be part of a virtual summit. And I started writing the book. Eventually, the summit for me fell through. They decided they wanted to be an all-woman team of presenters. But I had already started writing the book. I'd rediscovered my love for writing. I went ahead and finished the book, or I got to where I was finished telling the story, but thought maybe the book needed to be better. Thankfully, some great friends encouraged me to go ahead and publish it. And a wonderful lady named Lorraine Reguly from wordingwell.com helped me navigate the process of publishing through Kindle Direct and Amazon, doing the editing and the formatting and the submitting, and finally for the ISBN number and all that other stuff you have to do in order to self-publish a book. So again, didn't plan to write a book. Good friend said, I think you can do this in 45 days. And I told her, I said, you're full of you know what. And if this doesn't happen, I'm going to tell everybody it was your fault. But she was cool with it, and we got started, and good things happened. And in January 2014, I published Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, a blind man's inspirational guide to success, which includes 11 actionable exercises along with my email address so people can report to me on their progress should they choose to do so.
Well, and when people do respond to you, Max, now that you're doing lots of speaking, you have the blogs, you have the podcasts, people are responding to your book, do you see certain themes or common barriers that individuals face and are trying to overcome in their personal development?
Right. I think for a lot of people, there are, I think, two main things. One of them is that many people don't believe that they can do what I have done. And I point out to them that I am nobody special. I'm not a unicorn, because if I was unique, then there would be no reason to read my work or listen to me talk, because they couldn't do what I do. And in fact, many of the people that I've talked to over the years have basically passed me by and are doing even, more impressive things than I am. But we're all on our own journey, and we all do what we can at the time we can do them. So, but I feel like sometimes inspiration can be debilitating. Sometimes seeing other people doing really cool things can make you feel like you can never do those things. And I do my best to try to avoid that happening for anybody that I come in contact with. And I think the other thing is we underestimate just how powerful comfort is. I know it's been said 100 times, but we can become comfortable with pain. And many people, especially emotionally, become comfortable with pain. And a lot of times it's really just the whole belief that things could be worse. If I, make that one more effort and try something after failing as many times as I've already failed in my life, things could be worse than they are right this minute, instead of thinking that, things could be the same, or they could be better, or they could be amazingly better than they are now. So I think I think a lot of people talk about getting out of your comfort zone, but I think we really need to appreciate just how hard that is. I mean, it's something I think too many people talk about almost flippantly, as if it's an easy thing to do. And, breaking a pattern, a routine, is not an easy thing to do. When I started going to classes to prepare to have gastric surgery in 2012, the one thing they reminded us of all the time is it takes at least 30 days to create a new habit. You think about it, you do something every day for 30 days to create one new habit. That right there just shows you how hard it is to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. Now, me, for whatever reason, I tend to think it's because my gradual vision loss taught me adaptability, and my carnival life taught me resilience. I'm one of those people who I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. There aren't a lot of things on my list that I'm like, I ain't going to do that. I ain't going to try doing that. Don't even talk to me about that. It's a very short list. So I really think we need to empathize more when we talk to people about getting out of their comfort zone, because it is so much harder than the experts make it sound when they talk about it.
Well, taking that first step can be very difficult. I agree with you. How would you recommend somebody start their journey? They want to do more self-discovery and development and to take that first step.
Find the smallest thing you can do. Make a list of things you want to do and need to do. Find the smallest thing to do, the least scary thing you can think of, and do that one thing today. And then look at your list tomorrow and see, okay, what are some of the less scary things I need to do? And build up your fearlessness muscles. Start with something really small. I started with sending my brother $11 so he could file for a domain name. Never believed in my wildest dreams that I would be here. I wasn't even sure that I could make a living selling other people's used rides. It was not a thing at the time. So, find the thing that's least scary to you. The other thing that works for me, and this is one of those things I have a hard time explaining, but a lot of times in my life, I just didn't have a choice. I mentioned earlier learning to code HTML. I didn't do that because I wanted to do that. I did that because as a blind person in 2007 with no money, talent, or skills, the only way I could get a website started was to learn to write my own code and create my website one page at a time. That was the only option I have. So sometimes if you can persuade yourself, if you can phrase the argument that you're having internally in the point of view of, I don't have an option. One of the things that the carnival life taught me really well is the only thing that mattered to us was, could we make opening on Thursday or Friday? Because in the carnival business, that's all that matters. Nobody cares about your personal life or your professional business. All they want to know is, can they ride the Ferris wheel or the tilt-a-whirl? Can they buy a funnel cake or a cotton candy? And can they try to win a teddy bear on Thursday? That's all they care about. So a lot of times we did things because we felt like we had no choice. We had to get open. And, we didn't win a lot of style points. There were many weeks we opened and some of the lights weren't up, or the canvas wasn't hung, or only half the toys were displayed. The point was being open, having ticket seller, having ride operators, so that people could enjoy their weekend, we could make a living and raise money for them. So, we had we don't have a choice mentality that we built up over time. So if you can find a way to present a challenge to yourself as, if I've got no choice but to do this, and it's not easy, and it's not something that most people are familiar with thinking in that direction. But if you can figure out a way to frame it to yourself that way, then trust me, it's a lot easier to do something. It's a lot harder to do something when you feel like you've got lots of options. It's a lot easier when there's only one choice, or you think there's only one choice. And as Henry Ford basically said, those are both the same things. If you have no choice or no other choice, but you think you have no other choice, those are both the same things. And when I first started, I really didn't see any other way to sell used carnival rides than to learn how to build my own website. So that's another thing I would say about fear is, can you overcome the fear through necessity, through obligation, through, I just have to find a way to do this somehow or else.
Max, you've shared so many good tips on motivating for individuals who might be out there listening, who are trying to motivate themselves to take that first step and to start. We're kind of closing this session. It might seem an odd place to the listeners to close our session today, but Max is going to be back with us next week. So we will be talking more about professional development and some of the work and training and how he's helped people become bloggers and do some of those things. But Max, is there any final takeaway you would like to give to folks in terms of personal development?
I would say that there's nothing I've done they can't do, but I would also say that I'm nobody special. I mean, I've accumulated a lot of talent and ability over time, but there was a time when I didn't see myself as anybody special. So I would say, just like my song says, if I could do it, then what's your excuse? Because trust me, in my heart, I'm always going to be that fat, carny kid from East Texas who now is an inspirational leader, a blogger, author, podcaster, and doing all these other great things. So if I can do it, then there's no reason you can't do it too. Or think about it another way. If I can do it, there's no reason you can't do even bigger and better and scarier things than I've done.
Well, thank you, Max, for that final comment. To all the folks listening, I hope you've been inspired and have enjoyed this segment. Join us again next week. We'll have another segment with Max talking a little bit more on the area of professional development and some of the work he's done and the work he's helping others to do and progress in their own professions. So thanks for tuning in today. Again, I just want to remind you, August 12th is the Bringing Print to Life fundraising hike for Audio Information Network. I also just want to remind folks and just kind of plant the seed. We're in the process of doing a name change and selecting names. I don't have anything for you quite yet, but once we have some choices, we'll be putting some things out there for folks so you can give us some feedback. But I just want to plant that seed so when that happens a little bit later this year, you'll be prepared for it. And as always, please tune in to our other podcasts, After Sight, with lots of interesting folks who have vision loss doing and amazing things, interesting things, everyday things, but really interesting folks. Penn Street hosts that. Bill Lundgren hosts Blind Sight that covers mental health topics. And then we also have BLT, our blind level tech program that talks about all things tech. And I know that's become really popular and there's so many tech questions. So tune in for that as well. Thanks so much. We'll join you next week.